Or is it just, oh, it is already us. I said I was going to introduce you. Let me make sure I got but it already came on that we're both here. So let me just say this. Hi, folks out there, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube. Jay Terry here live with Connecticut attorney Brian Festa and founder of the Connecticut Freedom Alliance, which I'm a part of and helped to found too. I'm very excited to work with this dynamic human being who's going to fill us in on some things going on in the state of Connecticut, because we have quite a lot of things happening. Welcome, Brian. Nice to have you on.
Thank you for having me, as always, Jay. I really appreciate you bringing this content throughout this long before the shutdown started, but throughout the shutdown, the pandemic, whatever you want to call it. You've really brought some great content to us. We've been watching your interviews, and whenever possible. So there's so much out there right now. It's hard to keep up sometimes, but yeah, keep up the good work.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for all that you guys have been doing in Connecticut Freedom Alliance and doing some great interviews on Zoom. We got to get those out there to the public. You've had quite a few wonderful guests on. So I think that there's a lot of positive happening, as well as some really weird, dark, and scary stuff. So let's just get right into it. So we just saw that article come out about the special session. So can you tell folks a little bit about what we're expecting in that special session?
Okay, and I hope you can hear me, because you're kind of going in and out for me. So just let me know if you can't hear me. It does say that my connection is a little poor, and I know you mentioned we have a lot of cloud cover today and some high winds. So I hope
so far so good.
Just let me know if you can't.
Can hear you. I'll let you know if we can't.
So. All right, awesome. So yes, this morning, or very early this morning, an article came out in the CT Mirror by Jenna Carlesso, who had contacted me yesterday. So we did have a heads up. I knew this article was coming out, and she confirmed for me something that we have long suspected. We have been telling our members for at least the last couple of weeks, since Mother's Day at least. We had been telling them that this is likely to be raised in a special session, that we have information from our sources within the legislature that was strongly suggesting this was an issue that was going to be raised in a special session. Now, I know there are some that disagreed with that. There are even legislators, at least one legislator that came on during a town hall we had and disagreed. I won't mention his name, but I stated very clearly even then that I did not believe that. I thought that they were going to raise this. Sure enough, Jenna confirmed with her sources, both in speaking to Ritter, Representative Matt Ritter, as well as Senator Martin Looney, that this is something they are planning on raising in a special session. Whether or not they'll be able to get it passed in one day, which is what typically the special session is, remains to be seen. But they are planning on raising it. They think the time is now. They're capitalizing on this. They're exploiting this, which I think is just disgusting, that they would do that. There are people that have been harmed by the virus. Whether or not it's been exaggerated, people argue about that. Obviously, we think there are a lot of numbers that have been inaccurate. But regardless of that, even if it weren't exaggerated, you don't exploit public health to advance a political agenda. And basically, that is basically just to funnel money to the pharmaceutical industry. I mean, we know about the ties that Representative Ritter has, Representative Linehan has to the pharmaceutical industry, and it's very, very clear that this is something that was in the works for a long, long time. I mean, listen, Matt Ritter told the press in 2015 that his plan was to eliminate the religious exemption in Connecticut by 2020. He still has time to do that. He has one day left to do that, and that's a special session. And anyone who thinks he wouldn't use that one day, especially during a public health crisis where he can use that as an excuse to do it, I mean, just hasn't been paying attention. I mean, obviously he is going to raise this. And we say this not, and I want to, if I may, Jen, too, I want to point out, we don't say this to incite fear and panic. Like, there are some, even today, that we're saying, well, don't get scared. Don't overreact, people. Like, maybe they're just trying to bait us. Let's calm down. Let's not do anything. No, I mean, we have to do something. I'm not telling people to panic. I'm not telling people to freak out. That's never been our message. Our message is simply contact your legislators like you always have before and let them know that you would not support such a measure. Now, if that works and if there's enough people, I mean, if some of these representatives in key districts or senators in key districts get 100 or 150 emails saying they oppose it, then maybe they'd vote no on it. And maybe, or maybe it wouldn't even come to a vote. Maybe we would be effective in stopping it before it even got voted on. So what can it hurt, I guess, is the question. What can it hurt to have people write, professional emails to their legislators saying that they oppose this? And that's all we're asking people to do.
And that's a very reasonable thing. And now is the time to take action. I put a post out there and I connected the removal of the religious exemption with the fact that there's 2 exemptions that people in Connecticut can take for a vaccine. And I think most folks know about the medical exemption, and folks that are following us in the group know about the religious exemption. But any folks out there that might be tuning in that's never heard of it, Connecticut still has an intact religious exemption. So what this means is that people are able to utilize that religious exemption, and some say it's abused. It's not abused. It's my God-given right to protect and love my body and my children. And this specifically is, about Connecticut public schools. But if this repeal happens, there will be no religious exemption for anybody. And then the other part that I'm tying this into, which I think is really important, as we've seen from the Governor Lamont's panel, his advisory panel, and what they've released about the universal flu vaccine given to all residents unless there is a contraindication. Can you elaborate on what that means, please?
So, I mean, where to begin? That's actually worse, I think, than taking. I mean, they're both bad, right?
They're both bad. They're both bad.
But the reason I say it's worse, 2 reasons. Number one, it would apply to everyone, not just school children.
No.
It would apply to adults as well. If you want a driver's license, employment, anything, that's number one. Number 2, it's every year. It's every year. So the vaccines that are on the schedule to enter school, they're not every year. I mean, there may be boosters, and there are boosters for some of them where you have to get 2 rounds or 3 rounds, but you don't have to get the same vaccine every single year. The flu vaccine has not been mandated yet for schools.
Some people are confused by that. They don't understand. They think it already is mandated across the state for children. Like that's, that it's already a mandate, and it is for daycares, correct?
Well, I mean, yes. And they will tell you that. They want you to believe. It's my understanding that it is for daycares. Actually, let me not say firm yes. I believe it is, but I'd have to check. I'd have to double check that. It's been a while since I've had to submit anything on that. But honestly, it's curious because there's a lot of people, there's a lot of schools, there's a lot of districts that tell parents that the exemption is already gone.
Wow.
That you can't exempt. I mean, I've heard that. I mean, I've heard it from Catholic schools. I've heard it from daycares. I've heard it from parents trying to enroll their kids in public school, where the official, the nurse, usually it's a nurse, will say, no, that's been repealed. There's no religious exemption anymore in Connecticut. And there are parents who believe it.
Wow. That's just crazy.
And so we're already fighting that. So even though it hasn't been repealed, because there are a lot of people, believe it or not, well, you believe it because you talk to the public a lot. There are a lot of people that don't even know about this religious exemption fight, that don't even know what's been going on.
No, and there are people who want to utilize that religious exemption. And okay, so when we talk about a constitutional republic, and I was just reading the Connecticut Constitution, and thinking about a constitutional republic and those inalienable rights, people who are thinking that in the Constitution state, in the United States, that we have those rights to say, no, I don't want that for me or my child, and it should be no problem. But it has become a problem as we move from this idea of servicing the greater good, which may sound nice on the surface. I want to help my neighbor. I care about people. Yes, we all care about each other. Yes, we want to help our neighbors. But the government cannot guarantee anyone's safety or this greater good concept. And so by repealing laws, because this law has been on the books, the religious exemption of vaccination happened in the 60s, where they made it mandatory, right? And now
1959.
59. Now, didn't the religious exemption get established when they mandated the vaccine over your constitutional rights to refuse medical treatment, correct? Is that how that worked?
It was for the polio vaccine. So it was only, it was because obviously in the 1950s, well, the 40s really is when, the polio epidemic started, in the 40s and the 50s. That was the most dreaded disease. Nobody was afraid of measles back then, by the way.
Yeah.
All right. No, there wasn't a measles vaccine, and it wasn't an MMR vaccine, and people weren't afraid of it. It was a normal childhood illness, just like chickenpox used to be a normal childhood illness when you and I were younger. Okay. And we all got it, and most of us, most people had no problems. But yeah, it was in 1959. It was proposed as a religious. Actually, at the same time the mandate to get a polio vaccine was proposed is at the same time the religious exemption was put in. So the mandate and the religious exemption went hand in hand. And there was someone that actually advocated, a gentleman by the name of Lawrence Soda, and there was also a state representative. His name is escaping me right now. I apologize, but they advocated for a philosophical exemption actually at that time. And if you go back and read the legislative history, and I have done that, for the religious exemption and for the original vaccine mandate for schools, there's discussion on in the committee at the public hearing, which was only like a couple people. It wasn't like our public hearings now where we have hundreds or thousands. It was like a couple people would show up, but it was one vaccine, right? So people weren't really worried, and none of this stuff was known about potential harmful side effects. So someone actually got up there, a couple people, and said and advocated for a philosophical exemption, and say, why should it just be religion? What if you don't belong to a religion? What if you have a personal belief? Shouldn't that be protected? And it wasn't adopted. They adopted so Connecticut's only had a religious. Interestingly enough, though, I would argue for various reasons that the philosophical exemption is protected in Connecticut, because the First Amendment gives you now the Supreme Court in a decision called Welch versus.
Oh, you're breaking up on me a little, Brian.
You too, I believe.
Sorry, it broke up a little bit on me.
Let me try to move that. Can you hear me any better?
I can hear you better now. Sometimes I can't wait to move into our new studio. We're gonna have a great connection. If worse comes to worse, we could just do it off of video, and we'll do it by a call via speaker. Go ahead. You were saying some great stuff, so it's really annoying that it.
What did I?
You were just talking about the hit. Oh no, it's breaking up again. Dang it. Go ahead. Let's see if
I can hear you. I can hear you fine.
Okay, just go right ahead. Let's see if it goes. I'll be quiet. Maybe that'll stop. Uh-oh. You're frozen.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Is it on my end? Maybe if I move to another room, is that going to get better? Or
maybe. Let's see how that works.
Okay. I'll try to move to. Okay. Well, I'll just move to a different area over here. All right. So 1959. You can hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay, I was talking about 1959 and how they actually proposed a philosophical exemption. However, I argue that we already have a philosophical objection. The United States Supreme Court has ruled that conscientious objectors, like in the Vietnam War, that conscientious objections are equivalent to religious objection. The same entitled to the same.
It's breaking up a little bit on me again.
Yeah. It's saying poor connection on message now. But anyway, I was just saying that you're protecting for your philosophical beliefs, your conscience beliefs, as you are for religious beliefs. The Supreme Court made that clear in Welch versus the United States and subsequent cases. So also in the state of Connecticut, in the public accommodation statute, there is protection for creed. It doesn't say creed. It just says creed. Okay, so I argue that we already have a philosophical exemption in Connecticut.
Yeah, because that's what.
And I argue that even if they repeal it, it's per se invalid because it's unconstitutional, because you're allowed to have that objection.
You know what, Brian? It keeps breaking up on me. You want to just call me and I'll put we won't be able to see you, but we could just put the call through. I mean, unless we could get it. Sorry guys, little technical problems. Sometimes when it's cloudy, the internet has some issues. I mean, we could try again. It's just you're saying really great information, and I want people to be able to capture what you're saying.
Okay. All right. So is this any better now?
It seems better. And if go ahead. Let's see if this will. Is it still saying poor connection?
Okay. So just ask me a question. It's not saying poor connection. Just ask a question of whatever you did or didn't.
Okay. So we're talking about the creed part. Now, so the repeal of the religious exemption, if they are able to do this. Now, what I did today is I made just a logical conclusion that repealing that religious exemption would affect. There would be no, you wouldn't be able to send your children to school, and without a vaccine, and the COVID vaccine will be part of that. And there is no COVID vaccine, and we can get into all the details about what producing a COVID vaccine and how difficult that has been. So it would be like for the future. So obviously it's a ploy utilizing a crisis state to do this in a special session, when I would think the legislature has way more important things to do than worry about the religious exemption, which how much of the population is actually using, and taking that inalienable right away from our children is a very draconian measure. And it just goes, it to me screams that this is more, it's not about public health. There's an agenda here, and it's overreaching, the government overreaching, and starting with the school children. And why every person in Connecticut, even if you don't have children in public school, needs to think about this is the fact that if the governor and his panel are able to, they are going to require a universal flu and COVID vaccine on a regular basis. And folks are really arguing with me, well, it doesn't say anywhere that they would not let you get a driver's license or let you go to work. But when the state says all, how else would they enforce it?
What do you think universal means?
Exactly.
It means for everyone, everywhere. It doesn't mean only in certain situations. That's not universal.
No. And there'd be no exemption. So if they're successful in repealing the religious exemption for public school children, it would be disastrous on so many levels for all citizens of Connecticut, not just the most vulnerable, our children. And I feel like it's so unnerving at this time, because it's. I thought we were a constitutional republic, right, Brian? Aren't we?
We're supposed to be. We're supposed to be represented. Our views are supposed to be represented. It's, the problem is we need to change public opinion. We need to educate the public, because they are the ones that are going to influence their representatives. In this representative government, we need to have more people reaching out to their representatives, and we need to elect the right people. Listen, we have races all over the state this year that are extremely critical, and that we have a real chance of winning. I mean, I'm actually optimistic, where I know there are a lot of people that aren't, but I'm hearing some things that are indicating that there's a groundswell of opposition to what a lot of these Democrats have been doing. And again, I'm not here to attack any particular party. It's just that on this particular issue, they have been not with us. Yeah. They have been very much against us and don't listen to us, many of them, not all of them. I'm not going to lump everybody into one barrel, but we have some very important races, and we have some great people running. We've been doing town halls in our group. As a matter of fact, tonight we have Joe LaPorta, who is running against Christine Cohen for Senate.
Nice.
And so he's coming on at 8:30 tonight in a town hall. So I urge you to join that. It's in our group in the Connecticut Freedom Alliance. If you're not in our Facebook group, you can join it, and then you'll have access to all of those Zoom calls. We let everybody in. It's the public. We let people ask questions. Hey, even if you're not 100% with us on this issue, we let you in. We don't believe in censoring people. That's the whole reason we founded this group, right, Jen?
Yeah.
It is so that everyone could have a voice, an opinion, even if we don't like it. Like we individually don't like it, we still let you speak. That's the point.
Yeah, and that's a beautiful thing, because discourse is how we grow as a community and as a society. And I that's exactly where I'm at, where I want to get out there. And I think the message gets it gets caught up in this vortex of the COVID experience, where people are just really freaked out, and it's alarming and scary. And I kind of want to segue into, let's, before we segue into talking about the children and what's going on with special needs kids under this lockdown situation, but just let folks know that you can join Connecticut Freedom Alliance. You could like the public page that you can find on Facebook. I'm pretty sure that it should, if you type it in, I know Facebook's doing some strange things lately.
Yeah, Twitter as well.
Twitter too.
CTFA. And the website is ctfreedomalliance.org. I do want to say one other thing, though, that you mentioned before we switch topics, if you don't mind.
Sure.
You said something about the COVID vaccine being required as well. So what they're currently looking at, and this was stated in the CT Mirror article, they're currently looking at having the COVID, first of all, grandfathering in, having a grandfather clause for any student pre-K and up, I believe, who is currently using exemption to be grandfathered in. But they're trying to amend that to exclude the COVID-19 vaccine so that you would still have to get COVID. Even if you're grandfathered in, you'd have to get COVID.
Right. That's right.
When it becomes available. Now, I was quoted in the article, and I said a lot more than they quoted me. You know how they always do that. I said a lot more. They only quoted like 2 sentences, but the sentences they did quote, I said, I think it's ridiculous that they would be using this pandemic in order to repeal religious exemption for a vaccine that hasn't even been developed or approved. We don't even have a safe and effective vaccine. We don't know if we ever will have one. Newsflash, we won't. Okay, have one that's completely safe and effective. Okay, and so they are going to mandate something when they don't even know if it's going to be available. I mean, that's just really ridiculous.
It makes no sense, really. I mean, and then repealing a law that is been on the books for years without any issue, and like drives me crazy, because there is no science that proves, like, asymptomatic carriers carry disease and are a problem, or it's all based on this conjecture and these what ifs, or these probabilities, or whatever. And as we know with the models that we've seen with Professor Ferguson from the Royal College of England, his whole model has been obliterated, and then he got arrested, or he had to step down because he was seeing his married mistress while he had the COVID. So none of this legislation based in fear is just bad. I mean, what did Benjamin Franklin say? Those who sacrifice liberty for safety, you're going to get neither. You don't deserve either. And that's a very, strong statement. And folks aren't like hearing me when I say, look, guys, it's happening to our school children. They're coming for the adults. Okay. I want to say this to a friend of mine. They're coming for the adults. It's not something that is conjecture here. It's written down, a universal flu shot for everyone. And this is why it is so important that those folks who know about what we're talking about be brave and start to speak out and get active. If you're not a part of Connecticut Freedom Alliance, it's a great group. I encourage any of my friends or people following me to get active in that group. Lots going on. Great Zoom calls that everybody is invited to be a part of. This is an election year, so it's really, really important that we, as a community, get out there and educate as best that we can. And though it's difficult to have these conversations, people get really upset, and it's just really hard when it comes to public health, and people think, that they're, the government it doesn't have a quick fix on how we stay healthy. That's really an individual's responsibility. Stay home when you're sick. Can we just agree to
Right.
that? It's really kind of simple. We don't need to change laws. We don't need to. People get injured by vaccines. Okay, that's most of the people who their religion and a relationship with God is. We don't need to explain that. We have a God-given right to protect our families and our health. Okay, so if you're injured by a vaccine, you no longer get one because, my gosh, your child went through this hell and it was the vaccine, and you can't get a medical because the medical exemption is extremely difficult to get. It's your God-given right as a parent to protect your child. That's your child.
And people don't realize that either. That's a great point that you're making right now, is that people don't realize how hard it is to get. I think people outside of our movement don't realize you can have a child literally develop seizures within hours of receiving the vaccine, have to be rushed to the hospital with seizures, and you will not get a medical exemption. They will tell you have to get the next round of that vaccine, that same vaccine that caused that. In order, if you want to keep attending school, you have to do that to your child again. You have children who develop, all kinds of complications, high fevers and, regression, lose their speech, all kinds of things, developmental delays that happen that are very obviously the cause of the vaccine, because the child was perfectly healthy and developing normally and had speech, and then all of a sudden gets a shot and, very, very quickly there's a downward spiral and they can't speak anymore. That's obviously the vaccine, but the doctor will still tell you that, no, you can't have an exemption. You have to keep getting vaccines and do further damage. It is almost impossible to get a medical exemption. And this idea that, oh, don't worry, we're going to expand medical, we've heard that before. We heard that from Senator Richard Pan in California. He lied. Okay, he lied in 2015 when they took away the religious exemption. He said it was going to make it easier. And then what happened in 2019? What did they do in 2019? They took away, for all intents and purposes, they took away the medical. They made it so it's nearly impossible. Like almost no one in the state of California can get a medical exemption now. It was hard before, even before they did that. They passed a new legislation, but now, I mean, unless you're a member of an elite class, you're not getting it.
No.
So it's scary. It's scary, and that's what they want to do. Remember, Connecticut follows California and New York. They look at those states as these shining beacons on a hill, okay, that they want to emulate. And they've said that too. They said, oh, look, we want to be progressive like these other great states of California and New York. Well, listen, if progressive means that you're going to take away my constitutional rights to freely exercise my religion, if progressive means that you're going to tell me I have to harm my child or myself regardless of what's happened, then I don't want to be progressive.
Yeah.
I'd rather be regressive.
It's very alarming, and to bring it into even closer to home with New York, so they weren't letting any children, I think of the case with Amir, who, thank God for Action Network. I think I'm getting that right, but I can decide. Is that the acronym for it? Anyway, so thankfully they were able to sue and get Amir back into school. This is a severely handicapped child that could not take vaccines by a doctor's, stipulation, and it didn't matter. They kept him out of school. So this applies to adults too. If they pass what they're trying to in this COVID situation, this applies to adults too. How is it going to happen? It's spelled out in their plans, and people say that's conspiracy theory. I don't trust your information, and it's mind-blowing. I wish I was wrong. I want to be wrong. Let me be wrong. I got a big old tinfoil hat on my head. I would love it. I want to be wrong. I wish I could wake up from this nightmare of saying, oh my God, on a daily basis, going out to the grocery store without a mask because I cannot wear one. I cannot breathe in one. And having people stare me down like there's something wrong with me because of all this virtue signaling that you're saving your neighbor by wearing a mask when the science does not support it. I don't know how many studies need to be shared and presented from so many different places on these masks, and even the mask itself having on we know this from reading vaccine package inserts,
Right.
It's
Fauci said it himself when this all started back in February. And he said, well, and they were asking him, or it might have even been beginning of March, when they were asking him about masks, is that good? I think it was March. I think it was as recently as March. And they were asking him whether or not it would be helpful to wear masks. Whether he said, no, that's not going to protect you, this virus. And so now all of a sudden we need to mandate it everywhere.
And it's crazy.
Do you see what's happening? Do you see what's happening?
Well, this is the writing on the wall for me. So what the mask symbolizes for me is like, if you accept this with poor science to back it up, you're going to accept the flu shot, which isn't even that efficacious. I mean, what was it at this year? I've seen stats where it was like 40%. I've seen stats where it was never above 50%. It wasn't even.
It's usually around 30 at best. And I mean, 40, I don't believe. I think at best it's at, from what I've heard, is 30. And in many years, it's only like 15 to 20% effective. So you're going to mandate a vaccine for every man, woman, and child. Every year, that could only be 15 to 20% effective at best, and have all these complications. And I mean, listen, there's a saying I like to use sometimes: the juice ain't worth the squeeze. It's just not. It's just not. Okay, you're going to possibly prevent the flu, which probably not, because it's only 15%. That means even if it's 20% effective, that means there's an 80% chance you're going to get the flu. Okay, that it's not going to protect you. Not that you're going to get it, but an 80% chance that it's not going to protect you, that it's not going to provide adequate protection. So let's say you get it. Okay, what happens to most people that get the flu? Most people who are healthy that get the flu. Do they die? Do they end up in a hospital?
No.
I've had the flu before. I bet you have too.
Mm-hmm. I totally have.
I've had it more than once in my life. But guess what? I haven't had it since I stopped getting the flu shot.
A lot of people say that. And let's just point out this too. It not only is the flu shot not effective the way, like, you're going to mandate a shot that it doesn't even ever get to the 50% effective rate. There is the risk of serious injury. Now, this part people don't know about. I have a friend, she's going to ask her lawyer, and I totally respect her inquiring with her personal family lawyer. She says there's no way that the state could mandate this and not have liability. I said, yes, there is. They are indemnified for anything that's on the childhood vaccine schedule via the 1986 Federal Vaccine Injury Act, which people don't know about that either. But I think this is going to draw attention more so to these things now.
The pharmaceutical companies are indemnified, but we actually have a statute in Connecticut that also says at the local level, the municipalities are exempt. If anything should happen, should there be any injury, any vaccine injury as a result of someone getting a mandatory vaccine to enter into school, which is in 10-204A, if you look down there, I believe it's 10-204C. Correct me if I'm wrong, but you can look it up later. I believe it's 10-204.
Yeah, I've seen it.
And it says in there that the towns the municipalities are exempt from liability. So if a school requires you to get it, which they do, you would think you'd sue the school, or you could sue the state maybe. But the problem is suing the state, even if there weren't any kind of indemnification, is almost impossible, because you have to go through, anytime you're requesting monetary damages, you have to go through the claims commissioner. And the claims commissioner, so you have to ask the state for permission to sue the state.
How does that work? When did that law get passed?
I don't even know. It's been in existence for a very long time, but it's almost impossible to get permission to sue the state. And not that they never do. It has happened. Obviously, there have been people that have been able to sue the state successfully, but it's almost impossible. Even that woman who had that poor woman, remember about 12 years ago, whatever it was, that had her face ripped off by a chimp down in Fairfield County somewhere. And it was legal to own those pets. And so they tried to say, well, you allowed this, they tried to now listen, I don't particularly think the state would have been held liable anyway. Okay. Because it's not like the state told her it's not like the state put her in that position to go visit her friend who had a chimp. She knew the friend had the chimp and she went there willfully. I don't think the state would have been held liable anyway. But even then, even though there was such a slim chance of the state having to pay anything to her, The claims commissioner still denied it. And she appealed to the legislature, and they denied her right to go to court. And she would have lost anyway, most likely, but they couldn't just throw her a bone and let her go to court. Nope. They foreclosed her, and she had her entire face ripped off.
I know, that's such a tragic story too. So when we're talking about your autonomy and your rights to your health, and then the government takes this idea of public health and for the greater good, we're into a slippery slope that goes against everything that our Constitution and our Bill of Rights protects us from. Personal responsibility, knowing that, there's so much science, right? That when the government takes this cherry-picked, industry-funded, corrupted science and puts it all over the media, because the media and the government, and people don't get this either. They say, oh, your conspiracy theory, how could everybody be in on this? Well, the pharmaceutical industry is humongous. And we are in the belly of the beast here in Connecticut. There's some very interesting stuff coming out about our governor and his wife and their connections in the health, with her venture capitalist stuff that she does, and some insider trading that we're starting to see with some of her health organizations. So when we as a people are faced with these executive orders now, and I go into our children here who are affected by these executive orders, and I pass on, we'll move on from the vaccines for a minute. We can do a whole nother show and re-talk about that, which we should as we progress through this. But what I want to talk about with the children as we get into summer camp time, and we both know and understand, is we have 2 children that are suffering under this. A lot. We have children that are suffering that are healthy children, and we have children that are suffering that have special needs. And what that's like how is it for an autistic child to be told to wear a mask or covering on that child's face, and they're older than 2 years old, and maybe it's an autistic adult who cannot wear that mask on their face or deal with the restrictions and the lack of services. This is so wrong.
It's sick, and I think that's the forgotten population, honestly, is well, in many ways, children in general have been a forgotten population. Impoverished children with mental health issues, children with special needs, other kinds of special needs. There's a whole host of, the list goes on and on, but they have, in my opinion, in many ways, they've been neglected throughout this whole thing. Playgrounds aren't even open. I mean, what a wonderful outlet in the springtime for children to get their energy out and to have a little sense of normalcy among everything that's going on with their schools being shut down and not being able to see their friends, to just be able to go to a playground. And now, the CDC has even admitted that it doesn't live on surfaces. It doesn't stay on surfaces anymore, and they still won't open the playgrounds. Because that was the initial justification for shutting down the playgrounds, is that it would live on the surfaces of the playground equipment. The CDC came out with a couple of weeks ago and said that's not true. And they still won't open the playgrounds. Open the damn playgrounds. And the state of Connecticut has opened all of the shoreline beaches only at 25% capacity, but has opened all the shoreline beaches except for Camp Harkness, which is the one state park that is specifically designated for individuals with disabilities to use that beach. And they have shut that down. They've opened all the rest except that one. To me, that seems like they're targeting individuals with disabilities. I mean, I've raised this issue before, and obviously it is personal for me. I've told people I have a child with a disability, and with multiple disabilities actually. And it's been very, very difficult. The loss of routine, the loss of structure, the loss of programming and services, the regression that's resulted from this. And now they're talking about they're not even going to make extended school year services available. Like originally they were supposed to at least be able to look forward to that, to have ESY, extended school year. Now they're saying, oh, we're going to do ESY virtually. So we have to now have these kids enjoy the whole summer now. And my son's been asking me, I want to go back to school. I want to see, my teachers. Why can't I go back to school? It's so hard. He's only 8 years old, but, even for someone, a little bit older, might have difficulty understanding, especially a child with disabilities, like why is this happening? And their whole lives have been turned upside down and inside out. And I don't really see a whole lot of people doing a whole lot. You know what I see? And I've been watching
these roundtable discussions that have been hosted by Lamont's advisory group and the Department of Education and all these webinars and stuff, I hear, oh, we're making a lot of resources available online. So you can go online and read all this stuff and watch these webinars. We have great programs to help you through this crisis. That doesn't help. We need these kids back in the classroom. We need them back now. Okay, these kids need one-to-one services. I'm sorry I'm getting fired up, but they need one-to-one services. They need direct interaction with their peers and with their therapists and their teachers. There is no substitute. And this virus is not so deadly and so dangerous as you need to take that away from them and violate federal law. Because guess what? The IDEA, the Individual with Disabilities in Education Act, and Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act as well, has not been repealed, has not been suspended during this crisis. The school districts are liable. They are obligated to provide these programs and services to students, even during this pandemic. And there will be lawsuits about that.
I hope so. I truly hope that people get together and we sue. Because I'm going to say this as a parent with a child struggling with mental illness, okay, how difficult it has been to lose. And I'll have people, and I really cannot, you cannot tell somebody what their experience is and tell them that they're wrong when you're not walking in their shoes. It's rude and disrespectful. And I've had people do that to me. Oh, there's services. My therapist talks to me. I'm just fine. I don't know what your problem is. Well, you know what my problem is? That's not available for my child who's new into the mental health system, okay? That's not available. It's all locked up for COVID. Desperately in need of what you're just saying about a routine. You need to help people who are struggling with mental illness to help them get into a routine. You need to also help people struggling with mental illness to be parts of groups, to be in group therapy, especially someone struggling with depression and the risk of suicide. This is a reality that I face on a daily basis, that I have to worry that my child who is depressed and stressed out could do something terrible. And this is an adult child, a young adult child, okay? So it is maddening. It is dangerous. It is irresponsible to run our state in a place of fear, passing these executive orders. And there was just a discussion that I have a thread of an action alert for the vaccine issue. And there was some wonderful links put into that thread that I'm really thankful for those folks sharing it. But I was listening to this constitutional lawyer say that these executive orders do not override our constitutional fundamental rights. Now all of a sudden our Constitution is written by racist white guys and should be completely disregarded because it's wrong and vicious and evil. And that is just not what the Constitution is all about. We have an imperfect history. I agree with you. But the Constitution of the United States was a wonderful document put together that has given us a freedom like nowhere else on earth. And it is really, I mean, when you say to people, oh, American exceptionalism, we're not exceptional right now. Okay. We're not exceptional right now, okay? That's not what I'm saying. But our Constitution is a wonderful document that other countries have modeled their own constitutions after. That document.
It's the most brilliant. It's one of the most brilliant, honestly, one of the most brilliant pieces of literature that's ever been written. And I think the most brilliant, most genius foundational document that's ever been written for any society in the history of mankind. And it does really bother me when people are always saying, not all people, but many people saying that America, the founders were racist and the foundations of this country, it's always been a racist country, and saying things like that, broad brushing the great people of this country, and not looking at things also. Listen, there are things that are objectively wrong. Mm-hmm. Okay, slavery was objectively mm-hmm. wrong, regardless of the time period. Okay, but there are also considerations that people don't people like to use revisionist history, and they'll pick out certain pieces of an individual's history that they like or don't like. So, with the example, we see it over and over and over and over again. There are some people in this country that have done great things and also done very bad things.
And depending on which side of the aisle you're on, they'll look at one part of a person's life. And I don't want to give specific examples because I don't want to get too far off field, but they'll look at one part and say, this person was great, but just ignore all the bad things they did. But then if they don't like, if they're on the other side of the political aisle, they'll pick out only all the bad things that person did and pretend like they did nothing good, and they'll start taking down statues of them. And you know what I mean? And it's like you have to look at everything, not in a vacuum. You have to look at the whole package and everything that was happening at that time and the whole person, not just that one section of their lives. And anyway, I just think that this country is the great. I'm gonna listen. You're gonna call me an They can call me an exceptionalist. They can call me an imperialist. When you call me whatever you want, I think America is the greatest country in the history of the world, and it still is. And we are a free society. We are trying to keep it a free society because they are trying to make it a not free society. And we're going to do everything that we can, not only at the Connecticut Freedom Alliance, but all across the country. We are working with networks all across the country to push back against these unconstitutional mandates. And that's the next step for our organization, Jay, is we really want to build this, and we've talked to you about this as well, of course, into a national organization. We want to go to Congress. We want to talk to people at the Department of Justice and work with them and do things at the federal level so that this can be illegal. Unconstitutional mandates like this should be illegal in all 50 states. And that's what we're going to try to do. We're going to try to make these things illegal. And so they won't be able to do these things at the local level. Yes, the states do, and the people of the states have certain rights, and they are protected, and the federal government doesn't have the power to infringe upon them. However, that doesn't include the right to do things that are contrary to the United States Constitution. The governors and the people of the states and the elected representatives of the states do not have the right to issue orders, mandates, laws, pass laws that are contrary to the United States Constitution.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is the supreme law of the land.
Exactly. And I totally agree with that. And I think that, these are dark times and we're so polarized. I'm very concerned about our future. I'm concerned about our republic. People don't understand what that means, the difference between what is a republic and what is a democracy. And there's lots of discussion about democracy, and the founders talked a lot about being in a democratic or ruled under democracy. And it's interesting when you start to get into that and what it means to be in a republic. And one of the things that I love about being in a republic versus a democracy is the republic respects the minority. Okay, and everybody gets to have due process and equal protection. That is the beauty of our Constitution. That is how a ship full of slaves on the Amistad came and landed in Connecticut and was able to have great lawyers who fought hard and they got their freedom back. Now that is the Constitution of the United States, and that is amazing. And why people don't understand that drives me nuts. Sorry.
I agree with you. I agree with you 100%. It's, if we had just a pure democracy without that kind of representative government, without the republic in place to protect, like you say, even the minority, so everyone has equal protection of the laws, it would be disastrous because it would be mob rule. It would be majority rule. Okay. And that's not the system of government we have.
No.
And that's not the system of government the framers envisioned when they were writing the Constitution. So all of those people who think, again, that they were just, trying to be self-serving and just trying to protect themselves as these white men and things like that, they didn't write it that way. It's very clear in the Bill of Rights. It's very clear subsequently after that in later years, the amendments that were passed, the 14th Amendment, equal protection of the laws. Again, that protects every single person, regardless of race, religion, creed. You are protected.
Yeah, and that's a beautiful thing. So when we really start to go into the history and dig into that, I recommend to everybody who's out there watching and listening to please read up on our Constitution. Go back there, reread that Constitution, know and understand what those amendments are, how they relate to us, because when we get into this concept, it sounds good, it's great public relations, this PR campaign, the greater good. You're wearing your mask. It's not for you. It's for your neighbor. You're getting your vaccine. It's not for you. It's for your neighbor. It's for this person. It's for that person. That type of thinking is extremely dangerous, and it sets us apart. It creates this huge divide. And that's like today where I was like, I kind of went on this, I was so upset, and I just went on this rant. I'm thinking, your virtue signaling is repulsive to me. You know why I say that, and it's harsh? It's because I can't go out without people like staring me down or like pointing their finger at me. Now, just because I go out with my free face, I can't wear that mask. There are numerous reasons, and I shouldn't have to give out my personal private information to anyone, why I'm not wearing a mask. Here's what we do in a free society, in a republic, is we respect each other. If you want to wear a mask, that's fine with me. If you want to get a vaccine, that's fine with me. Hey, open up our schools. If you're more comfortable keeping your child at home, there should be no penalty for you, but open up our schools for our children that really need to be there. Let the schools open and let the people decide what they want to do, and support the ability for everyone to make their own decisions, to take personal responsibility for those decisions, and live by the fundamental principles that individual liberty is paramount. And that's not a privilege for somebody's like, oh, you're so privileged. My grandfather fought for that right as a tech sergeant in World War II. Okay, I could probably go back into my family tree, and there's probably more relatives that fought for these constitutional rights, as all of us here probably have military or connections to people we love who fought for these basic rights. And I just don't want to lose perspective of that in this rush to the greater good. And you're wrong because you're questioning it. You're wrong because you don't want a vaccine. You're wrong because you don't want a mask. You're wrong because you're complaining about your daughter who's mentally ill, who can't get the services that you need. Know how selfish you are. This is ridiculous. And
Well, it is, and I do want to echo your sentiment about the Constitution and about why we all need to read up on that and to study that, because it is so important. That I think if people understand history more, I think you'd have less of that. If people understood the kind of things you're talking about, your grandfather fighting, and I had a grandfather who was in World War II as well. If you understand history and where we came from and what has been done in the past, and why these rights are so important, and what the rights that are recorded in the Constitution mean. And I always have to correct myself, because they are, David Oldham, he's a constitutional scholar from Constitutional Grounds. He does a weekly Constitution course in our group, and I encourage people to join that as well.
Nice.
Because he's educating people every Tuesday night. It's usually around 7:30. Sometimes it's a little later, around 8:15.
And this is Connecticut Freedom Alliance for anybody who just popped in. So the Connecticut Freedom Alliance, which you can find on Facebook. You can also, for anybody who's out on Twitter, you can find it on Twitter. What is it again on Twitter? The handles?
It's at Keep CT Free.
At Keep CT. I can't speak today. At Keep CT Free for those folks on Twitter. You can go and you can like that page now. And this is all free. You don't have to pay for it. It's available to.
We do accept donations, but we don't require them.
That's exactly. Sorry, let me rephrase that. So everybody has access to it, and we'll just do a plug for that right now. So the Connecticut Freedom Alliance, you can donate to the Connecticut Freedom Alliance online, and you can do a monthly donation or a reoccurring donation, and
one time.
A one-time donation. That's what I mean. Sorry, I'm like double speaking here. It's all that oral stuff I'm reading. Double speak.
Yeah.
But so you can get online and you can help support this organization that is actively educating and fighting on behalf of citizens in the state of Connecticut and doing some amazing things. We've had an amazing hearing. SB 5044 was the most historical hearing I've ever been a part of. I've never seen anything like it. The testimony went, was it over 24 hours? It was like 23 hours?
It was 21 and a half hours, but I want to give you kudos too, because you stayed through most of that filming. You were in the corner, you had your tripod set up, and you were filming it all. We always do that, even though it was on CTN. We always do that because we don't trust
No.
that feed could stop, or something could be cut out, or something could be later edited. We have our own, and that's why we're very, very lucky to have you with us at the Connecticut Freedom Alliance, because you capture that content. So we have our own personal copies of all of that stuff. It's not just for this hearing. You've done it for many hearings.
Yeah, I appreciate that. It's you know, I like to be able to get that footage to capture that moment. And for anyone who wants to see some of that footage, I have that up on YouTube. So anyone watching on YouTube, you can look through the channel. There's a bunch of edited clips. I also have stuff up on Vimeo. And I don't know how long it will be up there. Vimeo is heavily censoring, but I do have stuff up there. So, you know, it was the women there, the men there, the fathers, the mothers. But one thing that really touched me a lot with that was all of the stories of all the families and the experience with what really came out, and I believe this had an effect upon our legislators to a degree, was the amount of injury, was the amount of vaccine injury. And I know people will say, you know, they'll always use that, no, well, it's not, this is religion and blah, 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 and try to and not everything's not in a vacuum. So yeah, not going to go out and reiterate all that again.
Religious, I can't have a religious and a medical and maybe a philosophical. Who says you have to pick one or the other? I have to check a box, and then once you've picked religion, you can't also have a medical objection too. That's it.
Yeah,
it's just so Chris.
It totally is. And we've had a great time. So we're on an hour, so I'm going to wrap it up because I don't want to get too long. So we're going to have to do this again, Brian, and tap back in. And great talking with you, and I appreciate you taking the time out. And we'll just let folks know again, Connecticut Freedom Alliance is on Facebook. You can find it on Facebook. You can find it on Twitter. Also,
CT Freedom Alliance, ctfreedomalliance.org is the website. You can sign up and subscribe to our email list as well. We don't send out spams. We only send out emails, alerts when necessary, when there's something big going on that we have to alert you to. It's usually not even more than once or twice a month at most. So it's not something you're going to be getting your inbox flooded from us.
Yeah, and I think it's important in this day and age where social media has been censoring and cutting groups off. I get all kinds of weird things from Facebook now. I have a whole story I want to do about the fact checkers and how I found their facts to be fraudulent.
You know, you absolutely should. And President Trump was supposed to be releasing something today, an executive order regarding, against Twitter, against these social media companies that are censoring, because they fact-checked him and did something the other day. I don't know, there's a whole story about that. And so he was issuing that order today. I didn't see what it said yet. I do want to say one last thing before we go. I do want to make a quick plug for our rally on
that's
June
right.
6th.
I forgot. How did I forget about that?
No, that's fine. I almost forgot myself, and then I said, "Don't, it's going to kill me if I don't mention the rally."
Well, we'll maybe get together again before the rally, and we'll talk again. Yeah. That we could do that. Yeah,
but I just want to let everybody know real quick. It's June 6th at the Capitol Building in Hartford. It's going to be huge. We have Brandon Straka, who's the founder of the Walkaway campaign, and he's going to be our I'm calling it a keynote or our main speaker. We have Dr. Aaron Lewis, Pastor Aaron Lewis, who's a great friend of ours, a dynamic speaker. We have some legislators hopefully speaking, as well as some people who are running for office, as well as several small business and medium-sized business owners throughout the state in Connecticut who are upset about the shutdown. So it's a Reopen the Region rally. It's actually for 7 different states, including Connecticut, because the reason we did that is the governor, we said, hey, if he's going to compact with these 6 other governors to impose unconstitutional mandates on the citizens of these states, then the citizens of these several states are going to band together and unite and push back together against him. So against them. And so that's why all of those states, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Connecticut, New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and Delaware, they're all coming out for this. We are hoping for thousands of people there. Advertise it. We have the flyer in our group, and I'm going to put it on the website tonight as well. That just reminded me I have to do that. We're going to have this all over the place. Share it in all of your different state groups and all your networks. Doesn't have to be just medical freedom groups. Any freedom-loving people who want to reopen and get this economy back up and running, please share that and get the word out.
Oh, thank you so much, Brian. And I just put that in the comments on Facebook, and I'll go into Twitter and YouTube and put that in there as well. It's been a pleasure talking with you. And yeah, you know, all together, all of us, we the people, it means so much. And this divide has got to stop. And somehow, some way, we have to drop the fear. And I don't want to live in a world that's controlled by these technocrats who are, you know, using public health as a means to take away our inalienable constitutional rights that we've had, and have been, you know, we need these rights. I don't want to lose my rights.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much.
We're stronger together. All right. Thank you. Have a good night.
All right. Bye-bye, guys.